podcast in which one man strives to level up his geekhood and helping you do the same, one battle at a time. Now, let's get geeky with Gamer Leaf.
Imagine that you were just evicted from your apartment 2 days ago because your roommate took the rent money and spent it on a car. Now you're checking into a homeless shelter with only $200 to your name, and you have 6 weeks to get your own apartment before you are asked to leave. How are you going to make it?
Did that sound familiar, guys? It didn't to me neither. But this is the story of 42 Days, The Journey Out of Homelessness, a new game on Kickstarter. And today we're lucky enough to have on Kyle, who is the creator and mastermind behind this game. Is that correct, Kyle? Is that how you fit into line with this?
Yep, I am the sole creator of 42 Days, The Journey Out of Homelessness.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you for coming on Getting Geeky with Gamer Leaf with us. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me on.
No problem. Our pleasure. So let's rewind a little bit if we could and go back to the beginning. Not too far though, unless you were born into board gaming. How did you get started into tabletop board gaming, Kyle?
I played a lot of games when I was a kid, but really what kind of sparked me getting back into games is actually creating 42 Days. I've always been a creative individual, and I've always wanted to make stuff and build stuff. Like, I love Legos, and then I just kind of wanted to create something other than Legos, essentially is how it came into being. And then I created the game, and then it got me really into trying to play other games. I have some friends that play a lot of games, so I've kind of partook in that.
Okay, cool. So besides 42 Days, do you have a current favorite game? They probably drag me out into the street if I let you pick your own favorite game.
Well, it is kind of one of my favorite games. But no, what I currently play quite a bit actually in the shelter that I work at right now is Century Golem. It's a little card game that you like pick up gems, get different points and everything like that. So I enjoy playing that quite a bit.
Okay, cool. And what kind of mechanics does that use?
I'm not sure what it would be called. Essentially, you just have cards where you pick up and where you can pick up different like gems, and these gems go into, if you get a combination, you can get a card from the top to get points off of it. I can't remember what the mechanic of that is, but
is it Splendor? Or it sounds a lot like Splendor, a game me and my family like.
Kind of like Splendor.
Oh, okay. And it's called what again?
Century Golem. It's by Plan B Games.
Yeah, that sounds pretty fun. So, word on the street is you have a new game on Kickstarter. What can you tell us about it, Kyle?
Well, 42 Days, The Journey Out of Homelessness is an education board game where players can experience what it's like to be homeless without ever actually becoming homeless. And it's a pretty fun and exciting roll and move kind of game where you really get to actually experience what it's like to be homeless. It is a fun game, but it's also kind of gut-wrenching with kind of some of the stuff that you have to go through. Like, you could be taken to the ER where you have to lose $1,000. And your goal is you have 6 weeks or 42 days to go from being homeless, going into a shelter, to try to get into housing. And if you're unable to get into housing, then you go out on the streets and you kind of just do this cycle the way that people who are homeless actually have to live their lives.
Were you actually in that situation before? How did you do your research for the game?
Well, I almost became homeless myself, but that was like 3 years before my whole experience in trying to create 42 Days. So what happened for me to create the game is I was working as a shelter advocate for over a year and a half. And I saw all these different situations and everything that happened. And I kind of wanted to make this push because I had some friends and actually my brother kind of have this opinion that if you're homeless, all you need to do is work and then you can get into your housing and all of that stuff. When I almost became homeless, I was working a full-time job doing everything that I needed. And I was barely getting by until eventually I had to ask my family for help. So that's how I avoided that situation. But So that kind of inspired me to say, okay, what is it that people who are homeless are doing, and how do you get others who don't understand their struggle to understand that? So then I compiled all the different things that somebody in a shelter could go through for a situation. I put that into just kind of like a percent base on how often something could happen. And then I just made these 3 decks of cards to represent that, and then just had people playing it. Originally, the game started off as a folder cut in half with 3 circles on it, and I just made all these handmade cards, and it was a fun mess when I was originally making it.
Well, there you go. So when you were making it, was there ever anything that just wouldn't work? Any mechanics that wouldn't work, or anything about the game that you initially started with that wouldn't work that you had to cut out during the play testing?
Well, originally what didn't work is I did a ton of research and I wanted to put like everything in there. And one of the biggest problems that I was running into is I wanted people to have like the choice on when they're playing the game on what to do if they're homeless. Like, say you have the opportunity to drink. Are you going to do that or not? And I kind of ran into an issue when kind of talking with all my friends and kind of getting their advice is nobody would pick the drinking card if the point of the game is to not be homeless. And there are some people that unfortunately can't help but drink, but I had to cut back on making the game super complex again with all the choices, because you would end up with a massive, massive game that would take hours upon hours to play. And I kind of wanted to make something nice and simple so people could relate to it and more people could get into it besides the really heavy gamers.
Okay, so does 42 days, does that make it a little bit lighter, or how'd you come up with that number?
In the shelter that I worked at, the program that they had was people literally had 6 weeks before they were asked to leave. And it didn't matter how far they got to getting to an apartment. If they did not have their apartment after 6 weeks or 42 days, they were told that they had to leave.
So that's where that number come from?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So if me and you were to sit down to play 42 Days, The Journey Out of Homelessness, how would play look? I mean, how would it sound? This is a podcast after all.
Oh, that's a good question, kind of try to answer or figure out. But so essentially what it is every player would start off and you'd roll to see how much money you'd start off with in the shelter, because not everyone who comes into a shelter is completely broke. They all kind of have some money. So what you do is essentially you just roll a dice, you draw a card. Say you draw a card where you do some extra hours through some temp agency. So you're going to gain some money on that. And you're going to just keep rolling and try to collect money and try not to lose money. Like there are some situations that like you could have your bike stolen. So if your bike is stolen, you're going to have to buy a new bike with a new lock, possibly lights if you're riding in the dark. And then you're just going to try to compile $3,000 or more to pay for your first month's rent, your deposit, your startup bills with like electricity and internet and your food, and then kind of have some emergency money saved up too.
Yeah, I was going to ask where that 3,000 come from. So that's what all that stuff would cover.
Yep, the $3,000 would approximately cover your first month's rent, your deposit, food, emergency money, and bills and all that.
Okay, cool. And so, so you have to not be homeless to win the game, or is there more than one winner? How does that go down?
Well, really, how you win in the game is you either can do a half game or a full game, but if you finish the end of either your second or your fourth round into housing, you technically have won the game. But really, this game can be an endless cycle that you keep going, because just because you were homeless and you got into housing doesn't mean it can't happen again. And there's quite a bit of people that I've ran into or I've worked with in a shelter that have gotten into housing and then they've lost it. So it just kind of shows the aspects of how that can happen as well.
Oh, okay. How's the replayability? Like, can you play it over and over again, or is it always the same kind of play?
No, it can be played over and over again. I'd say the replayability, You wouldn't probably play it a month every single day straight and play like 2 or 3 games, because then eventually you do kind of run into the same kind of situations. But every gameplay that you play, there's enough cards to make every single game different. And if you're playing with groups, it really gets everybody kind of like talking and trying to figure out different things on why certain things happen to people who are homeless. Like if you were having somebody live, like in North Dakota, if you had somebody living in your apartment who's not on the lease, you can immediately get evicted because of that. And that's just a safety thing with lease contracts and everything like that. And then, so there's just, it encourages a lot of discussion, and there are a lot of people that have asked questions on why certain cards are the way that they are. And I like to just explain why that is.
Does everybody get their own deck of cards, or how does that go?
No, so on the board, there are going to be 3 different rings, and each ring represents a different kind of homelessness, or 2 of them represent homelessness. You have a chronically homeless circle, a homeless circle, and a housing circle. So everybody's going to start off being homeless. And then if you were to go around the board and you weren't able to make it into housing, on your last round, you go into chronically homeless, and chronically homeless is a lot more mental illness and addiction issues. But how our homeless system is set up, those who are considered chronically homeless get more benefits and are able to get into housing faster than those who are just like new to being homeless and trying to get themselves out of it.
So that's how it is in real life as well as in your game?
Oh, yeah. I have seen a lot more individuals who are chronically homeless get a lot more benefits and assistance and whatnot than those who are not. And I know a lot of people who just entered becoming homeless who just need a little bit of help, but how the system is structured, they end up being homeless longer before they can get that assistance.
Do you think playing the game has helped anybody who was in that predicament?
Oh, yeah. I can definitely say it has. It's definitely, when I've played it with clients, a real kind of eye-opener, because some of them have addiction issues, drinking issues, or they just have spending issues. And it's really interesting to see the reactions when they're like, hey, this is kind of like how my life is going. This is kind of interesting. Or I've had 3 years of experience working in shelters, so I've had a lot of different unique experiences. And it's really fun to play the game with people who I've had to ask to leave, say they were intoxicated and they were kind of like upset and angry and everything like that. And then they play the game and they see that and they draw that, like, this was kind of my life. And they can see the fact that they might have been drinking. So then they were asked to leave the shelter for X amount of time. And then the game got harder for them because they were asked to leave and they had to like try to stay in a hotel. So they spent all their money in a hotel, then come back to the shelter. And just playing with the individuals who are experiencing homelessness with it, it brings a whole different level of reality to it and how they feel that it's very accurate. And some of them, I had one individual particularly, and she struggled with drinking quite a bit. And whenever she did, she wanted to play the game so she could realize, hey, drinking is a really bad idea because I'm going to fall back even further.
Oh, okay, well, that's interesting. So why did you go the route of Kickstarter for this game?
I went the route of Kickstarter because I see a lot of board games that are on there that have become successful. I really like the whole idea of crowdfunding, getting people involved to support a project. And I thought Kickstarter would be a good idea just to promote it and try to get people involved, especially people who necessarily, like in my field, I deal with a lot of social workers and all that, and I'm kind of in this tight-knit group. So I'm trying to also branch out and meet new people and kind of talk with people to educate them about different aspects of homelessness and try to get into more board gaming as well.
Yeah, so that's really cool. So a lot of times when I'm talking to people on Kickstarter or whatnot, or one of my favorite podcasts is called Funding the Dream by Richard Bliss. And on there, he talks about most of the time you don't have a funding problem, you have a crowd problem. What are you doing to raise the crowd awareness? Like, is there going to be any reviewers on YouTube or anywhere else that people can hear about this game?
I'm definitely looking into trying to get some actual review copies made and send to individuals to try to help with that. I do know I have a presentation where I'm going to Valley City in North Dakota to present in front of a small group of college students about the game. So hopefully I'm okay with them either video recording them or just tape recording kind of how the game goes and their reactions with it. And then otherwise, it's just emailing a whole bunch of people and trying to make some phone calls to say, hey, this is what I made. This is what I'm trying to get into. Is there any way that we can work together and whatnot? Because really, the purpose of the game is to educate people on what homelessness is like. That way, there can be a change in how some of the homeless system or the systematic ways that homelessness is dealt with can possibly be changed or improved upon.
That's awesome. So if you do get some review copies and stuff, have you been looking at particular reviewers online or?
I'm still kind of researching that. I kind of more open for anyone and everyone who'd be willing to give me a shot just because I am new to the board game making area. So I'm not sure if some people are like, oh, you're new. I don't want to deal with you because I don't know. I've dealt with a lot of my ambitions have led me to do a lot of different things. And I've run into you're a young kid. You need to slow it down. We're going to go with people who have more experience over than kind of how I am. But that's sometimes, I guess, how the world works.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I really like the aspect of it. So let's say people have fallen asleep because they're tired of listening to me, not because of you or your game, but they're suddenly jolted awake and now they have your full attention, Kyle. Why should they take a chance on 42 Days, The Journey Out of Homelessness, especially with all the other great games that are currently on Kickstarter?
Why people should take a chance on 42 Days, The Journey Out of Homelessness is because the game is not just a game. It is something that can educate people on what it's like for those who are homeless, and it can bring about a change in how homelessness is dealt with and educating on why homelessness is not necessarily always the greatest thing, because homelessness can affect communities a lot more than what people think. One of my favorite cards for people to draw in the game is going to the hospital where you have to pay $1,000. If that individual only has $100, they don't have to pay the other $900. You don't technically go into debt. And even when you're homeless, you don't technically go into debt. What happens is that hospital has this $900 that they need to make up. And so what they're going to do is they're going to try to make that up somehow. So they might ask for, if they get funding through taxes, for taxes to be increased. They might also increase their rates. So if they increase their rates, sometimes insurance companies might also increase their rates for consumers. That way, while the hospital makes up their money and the insurance companies have to pay a little more to cover the insurance, they can cover themselves as well. So really, homelessness affects everybody a lot more than just a face value thing. And that's what the game can bring about. And with that, with more people being educated on different issues with homelessness, the more people might be willing to help bring a change. And if there are more people willing to bring a change, then we can actually see homelessness in the United States potentially end. Now, is it going to end completely? No, because you have natural disasters and everything like that that will make it where some people become homeless. But if we can reduce the time frame of people being homeless, it's a lot more productive for a community.
Yeah, it does affect everybody, and 42 days will hopefully teach people how the system kind of works and what it would take to not be homeless. So that's really cool. I like what you're doing there, Kyle. That's awesome. So yeah, and we'll make sure we leave the links in the show notes and everything so people don't have to necessarily type it in, but they can just click on there and find out more about the game, and it'll lead them to the Kickstarter page and whatnot. I know you talked about doing a presentation and possibly getting some videos of people recording. Any word on when you might be doing that, or might you do a Kickstarter live, or do you know how you're going to go about doing that?
I'm still thinking on the Kickstarter live. I know on the 23rd is when I do my presentation. So that's kind of the goal on that aspect. But I'm open to doing a Kickstarter live. It's just trying to get a large enough audience or how to figure out to make that worthwhile for everybody.
Okay, yeah. So if you're listening, this should be, yeah. So if you do that, and then around the 23rd or whatnot, the ways you can, yeah, you got to see if you can get the audience or whatnot. Trying to think of different ways or whatnot. So mine is coming there to North Dakota. Is there a way people can find out more about this game if they're listening? Besides coming there to stalk you in person.
Well, they can definitely send me an email. I do have a website too. It's called play42days.com. On there is my email and my cell phone. I'm more than willing to answer phone calls or text messages. I mean, if somebody wants to message me on Facebook as well, I'm all about open communication and answering anybody's questions and trying to just help people in general kind of understand 42 days as best as I can.
Well, there you go. Cool. And yeah, so like I said, we'll make sure we can go ahead and put that stuff in the links or whatnot so they can just click it and stuff as well. So yeah, so that's great. Yeah, it looks like a really fun game. So I don't know if you listened to any of our podcasts before, Kyle, but the next section is actually called The Adventures in Application Acquisition, where we talk about an application, be it for cell phone, for tablet, for computer, or video game. It doesn't necessarily even have to be related to tabletop board gaming. A while back ago, we had somebody on who was talking about, I think the Photoshop. They talked about Photoshop and how they use it for what they do. Is there an application that you like or use a lot of that we can talk about for a moment, Kyle?
I use Fruit Ninja a lot just to play around whenever I'm bored. And I usually get into that a little too much.
Oh, okay. What can you tell us about Fruit Ninja?
Well, Fruit Ninja is essentially a game where you swipe around and you're slicing fruits to gain points. It's very simple. You have sometimes, depending on the different modes, where you have an arcade mode where it's timed. You could have this classic mode where you just slowly start slicing more fruit. They keep popping up at faster rates. You got to make sure you don't hit bombs. And it's super simple, but super addictive. I played it when I was in high school and I got teased a lot, and I play it sometimes at work too. People tease me because I really get into it. Like, I'm moving around, I'm getting antsy. It's pretty hilarious. I had one of my friends record me on it, and it looked like I was just like paranoid or something. It was just kind of funny.
Sounds like my mom when she used to play the original Nintendo when it first came out, and she'd jump with the controller just to jump over and get over the little spaces there in Mario Brothers.
Yeah, I kind of do that on games too.
Well, there you go. Cool bean. So, yeah, that's awesome. So if you own the rights to Fruit Ninja, Kyle, what would be one thing you would do to fix it or improve it?
Oh, geez, what would I do to fix it or improve it? I would just make, I don't know, I'd just make an insane mode where you just keep going and you just try to see how many combos or something like that you can get, or make it where they have blades that have powers and everything like that, but some of them don't. So maybe add all the powers to the game.
Okay. Is this a free app that anybody can buy, or is it cost, or is there downloadable content that you pay for, or how's that work?
Yeah, you can buy the full version of the game for $1. So pretty cheap, pretty fun.
Okay. And is it available on both iOS and Android, do you know?
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool. For about $1, and we'll make sure we leave links in the show notes or whatnot. Yeah, but we don't want to keep you all night, Kyle. But we really appreciate you coming on to tell us and our audience about the game. And we'll make sure that we leave links in the show notes so they can find out more about 42 Days. And we really hope that this project funds so more people can find out about it, and hopefully we can help end the homelessness or get as close to it as we can.
Yeah, no, that's the goal. That's my hope, and I really would appreciate anybody's help in doing that.
Cool. Well, thank you, Kyle. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Gamer Leaf levels up. Tune in next week to see if Gamer Leaf's luck holds up.